Chapter 12-15. The thick material turned to the last page. Under the soft light, Bai Qingxian put the material aside, picked up the teacup, and took a sip of water. She looked calm. This material had been sent to her office a few months ago. At that time, Bai Qingxian read it over and over again several times. Finally, because she didn't make up her mind, she temporarily sealed it up. The material involved a series of events such as the corridor transformation project of the Liaodong provincial government, as well as a large number of illegal trade in Anong. The target was Tan Xiaotian, the current deputy speaker of Fengtian Academy. There were more than 100,000 words of a large number of reports. Obviously, it was not written by one person, but from many aspects. The time span was as long as 5 years. Although there was no real name, a large number of reports were indeed true. To a certain extent, it could even be said that the evidence was conclusive. Even Bai Qingxian had an impression of many things mentioned in the material. This material appeared in her hands about 3 months ago. The source was still unknown. It was obvious that the election was coming. Because the election was coming, this was a spark sent to her by some people who wanted to fish in troubled waters. However, Bai Qingxian had never acted rashly. After reading the material in detail, she had already begun to let Yihan's Ministry of Supervision take action secretly. Now, she had also grasped a lot of breakthrough clues. Some of Tan Xiaotian's practices had been arrogant to the point of brazen. The secret investigation of the Ministry of Supervision did not even encounter any even symbolic resistance. Some vague evidence had already appeared in the hands of the Ministry of Supervision. So 2 months ago, the provincial government personally issued a notice that Tan Xiaotian was sent to the Jianghu Academy in Liaodong to enter the advanced course. Then, he began a half-year-long advanced course. When the news came out, there was no panic in Liaodong. Instead, there was jubilation. The Jianghu Academy in Zhongzhou State was the fundamental and important place of the academics. Its importance was even above that of Liaodong. There were quite a number of super heavyweights in the academics, including Li Huaqing, who had the background of the academy. Because of this, they were jokingly called the academics by the outside world. Specifically in Liaodong, the academy was obviously also a place where it was difficult for Bai Qingxian to influence. Tan Xiaotian had entered the academy's advanced class and not the training class. This was usually a sign that he was going to be promoted. In the past 2 years, the situation in Zhongzhou State seemed to be stable. But as the election got closer and closer, undercurrents were surging not only in Liaodong, but also in all provinces. When Bai Qingxian first entered Liaodong, she had already hurt the nerves of some people in Liaodong. In the past few years when she came to Liaodong, under the seemingly harmonious situation, there had been a lot of conflicts. Among them, Tan Xiaotian could be said to be a representative person. If Tan Xiaotian was transferred from the position of Deputy Speaker of Anong Province to the position of Deputy Speaker of Fengtian Provincial Government was Bai Qingxian's concession, then letting Tan Xiaotian enter the advanced course was undoubtedly Bai Qingxian's preparation for leaving Liaodong Province. In a sense, this seemed to be a sign that the academics had begun to exert their power and was ready to set things right in Liaodong. Tan Xiaotian entered the advanced class. Half a year later was basically very close to the time of the election. And the election in Liaodong Province might be before or after the election in Zhongzhou State. This time sequence determined whether Bai Qingxian could stay in Liaodong for a year or more than half a year. Therefore, now the academics in Liaodong were strongly supporting the election in Liaodong Province to be held before the election in Zhongzhou State. Tan Xiaotian entering the advanced class was a signal. When he returned from the academy and symbolically stayed in this position for a few days, it was very likely that he would be promoted from deputy speaker to one of the directors of Liaodong Province, the speaker of Fengtian Province, and become the new representative figure of the academy in Liaodong Province. This was undoubtedly the best choice. In recent decades, several speakers of Fengtian Province had directly ascended to the position of governor of Liaodong Province. Many people hoped that Tan Xiaotian could seize this clear line between heaven and earth. To say the least, even if he couldn't seize it, after the advanced class, Tan Xiaotian was likely to directly serve as the deputy governor of Liaodong Province, enter the council, and become the third person in the provincial government. This kind of rumor was getting clearer and clearer now. Obviously, the academics had begun to focus on the ecology of Liaodong province after Bai Qingxian left. Bai Qingxian would be elected as a member of parliament of Jianghu state in this election. After he left Liaodong province, the new speaker of Liaodong province would also be elected as a member of parliament of Jianghu state under the influence of Bai Qingxian and the power support of the academics, and he would take charge of Liaodong province. This person must be an important figure of the academics. In this way, the promotion channel of the academics was preliminarily perfected. As Bai Qingxian took the new post, the 4 super masters under him would inevitably leave here one by one and go to different places. From the bottom of her heart, because the cooperation with the academics in recent years was quite pleasant, Bai Qingxian did not intend to make a big earthquake before she left. After all, she was still the speaker of Liaodong province. She was responsible for anything that happened in Liaodong province. That was why she temporarily hung Tan Xiaotian up. After he left, she would hand this problem to her successor. The successor must be one of the leaders of the academics and would know how to deal with the internal affairs of Liaodong province in a low-key manner. This way, even if she left this place, she wouldn't lose too many points. However, it was obvious that her careful consideration to some extent was regarded as weakness by some people with ulterior motives in Liaodong. Therefore, these days, the internal affairs of Liaodong became more and more unstable. Bai Qingxian was still hesitating. But the matter of the third supervisory group entering Jianghu directly stimulated Bai Qingxian to make up her mind completely. The other party had already begun to take action against the new group and Li Tianlan. Bai Qingxian naturally would not be polite. She had a card in her hand and did not bother to wait for the signal from Yuzhou from Bai Zhanfang and Zhou Mulan. At this moment, before leaving the academics, she just wanted to lift this shameful cover and see how much shocking darkness was brewing inside. Now that she had shed all pretense of cordiality, Bai Qingxian did not mind giving everyone in the academics a hard slap in the face. Bai Qingxian took another sip of tea, and her eyes became more indifferent and determined. "Speaker, Minister Yi is here." The secretary knocked lightly on the door, walked in, and whispered, "Invite her in." Bai Qingxian nodded. Yi Han, who was slightly fat, came over and said with a smile, "Those guys are still outside. They said they wanted to smoke before coming in." Bai Qingxian nodded and asked directly, "Can we do it directly about Tan Xiaotian's problem?" Yi Han's face changed slightly. Obviously, she did not expect Bai Qingxian to be so direct. She hesitated and whispered, "Are you sure? If we can do it, let's do it." Bai Qingxian waved her hand lightly. "When Changjiang and the others come in, we will discuss the result together. It's time for some people to wake up." Yi Han took a deep breath and did not speak. Bai Qingxian held the teacup with a calm face. She thought of the leader and deputy leader of the third supervisory group. She thought of what they would do after entering Jianghu. Bai Qingxian gently raised the corner of her mouth. She was calm and confident, with indescribable grace. She did not have so many thoughts. She had only one thought now. Who dared to make life difficult for her son? She would let them die a horrible death. Chapter 12:16. Li Huaqing didn't see Li Guangtu in the end. He didn't even know Li Guangtu's current state from Li Tianlan. He just knew that Li Guangtu was still alive. Angry? Annoyed? Resentful? More or less, these emotions existed in his heart, but more than that, it was a kind of calmness that was expected. Before coming to Emperor Dong's palace, he had expected the current situation, so he was not surprised. If Li Tianlan was really so easy to talk to, the whole Zhongzhou state would not be in a sensitive state of anxiety now. Obviously, this matter could not be solved in a day or two. In the end, it still depended on fists and strength. Dongxing Wudi guessed that Li Huaqing came here in such a hurry because he had a trump card. Not only Dongxing Wudi. Because everyone else, based on their understanding of Li Huaqing, felt that he had a trump card. In the past 10 years, Li Huaqing had been gentle and occasionally strong. But no matter what he did, he would not make things unmanageable in the end. His steadiness made the whole Jianghu state trust him for 10 years, and this time seemed to be no exception. Li Huaqing did have a trump card. It was the kind of trump card that could immediately reach an agreement with Li Tianlan and could definitely make Li Tianlan compromise and let him go. With this trump card, he was 100% sure that he could persuade Li Tianlan. Even without persuasion, Li Tianlan could compromise. But that was not the way to play cards. If the so-called negotiation was destined to be unconditionally compromised all the time, it was not a negotiation, but a plunder. There was more than one way to get Li Kuang to back. If the hard way didn't work, he could use the soft way. Li Huaqing fully believed that as long as he unconditionally compromised, satisfied Li Tianlan's demand, and allowed Emperor Dong's palace to plunder a considerable part of the various resources of Jianghu state, he could take Li Kuang away at any time. But Jianghu state was not a logistics base that could be plundered by Li Tianlan. Negotiation, game, dispute, confrontation. Li Huaqing had to take him away. But before letting Li Tianlan see his trump card, Li Huaqing had to let Li Tianlan see his own strength first. This was the case on any occasion. Only when one side showed their strength first could they be qualified to talk on equal terms. He had to let Li Tianlan realize that the attitude of Jianghu state was not inferior. Jianghu state could give benefits to Emperor Dong's palace, but it could also completely destroy the system of Emperor Dong's palace. Perhaps Li Tianlan knew this. But being able to do it and daring to do it were two completely different things. What Li Huaqing wanted to show was the power that could destroy Emperor Dong's palace at any time. To put it simply, he wanted to show off a few of his abilities. After that, when the situation became stable again, Li Tianlan might become more mature in reflection. This was a battle of attrition. It was a battle and game between Li Tianlan and Li Huaqing. The focus of the game was Li Kuang. The bargaining chips were the resources of Emperor Dong's palace and the academics. As the election approached, a storm was brewing. Li Huaqing, who was confirmed to be re-elected, and the entire academics should have been the most quiet group, but now the academics had become the first group to jump out. For Li Kuang, Li Huaqing didn't think so. He was indeed the focus of the dispute between him and Emperor Dong's palace. But whether it was to protect Gu Xingyun, Li Kuang, or to accept Jiang Shangyu, Li Huaqing was very clear-headed from beginning to end. He had only one goal. Not for Gu Xingyun, Li Kuang, and Jiang Shangyu. It was for Li Tianlan. Just for Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was very polite to him, but also very impolite. The direct result of the disagreement was that Li Tianlan directly left. He was really leaving. Li Huaqing didn't even see Li Tianlan leave. After saying those harsh words, Li Tianlan just turned around and disappeared from his sight. The president, who was left alone in Emperor Dong's palace, stood alone and smoked a cigarette. Then he saw Xiao Mahai, who was now the chief butler of Emperor Dong's palace, walking over with a smile. They didn't talk about the old days. They were not familiar with each other. The general, who had blatantly embezzled tens of millions of prison funds in the past 2 years, had formally submitted his resignation a month ago. Li Huaqing also signed the resignation letter. Someone had taken over Xiao Mahai's position as the director of Emperor Dong's palace. Xiao Mahai, who had left the desert, went to Tiannan and became the director of Emperor Dong's palace. He seemed to be living a good life. Xiao Mahai arranged for Li Huaqing to stay in a villa in the central area of Emperor Dong's palace. The villa complex, which would probably be provided for the high-level officials of Emperor Dong's palace in the future, had just been completed. There was still a slight smell in the villa, but the decoration was absolutely comfortable and luxurious. Xiao Mahai arranged for people to prepare a sumptuous meal for breakfast or supper at this time. He even opened a bottle of wine and then left. Li Huaqing, who was not sleepy at all, sank his body into the soft leather sofa and slowly tasted the wine. He was not sleepy at all. He was a little excited inside. It was like the moment when he was about to draw the sword before the decisive battle. He was completely focused, energetic, and highly focused. All the fatigue was completely suppressed and disappeared without a trace. Li Huaqing seemed to have completely entered the fighting state. He had already made sufficient mental preparations for this game. It could be victory, failure, or inevitable losses. All of these were within the range of what he could accept. He held the power in his hand, and this power had completely locked on the target. He could not hesitate, and must completely vent it out. He just didn't know if Li Tianlan had already made the same preparation. Li Huaqing held the wine glass and looked at the deep night outside the window, like a peerless swordsman holding a famous sword, waiting for the dawn. Li Tianlan did not rest, either. He returned to the top floor of the castle, where only he lived. In the spacious and luxurious living room, the maid Mai Shiranui, who came from East Island with all kinds of thoughts, had not left yet. She sat quietly on the sofa and was in a daze. She had changed out of her sexy and revealing clothes. She was wearing a pure white exquisite dress, black stockings, and a pair of seductive red stilettos. She sat quietly in the spotless living room. Her legs, which were shimmering in black stockings, were crossed. She was elegant and quiet. Rather than a maid, she was more like a well-dressed imperial concubine waiting for the arrival of the emperor, or a princess looking forward to the arrival of her lover. She seemed to be thinking about something, so she did not come to her senses when Li Tianlan suddenly appeared in the room. She was thinking about her life and the future. Mai Shiranui had never denied her desire for power. This desire included many things, such as the fanatical worship of real power, the power to dominate the dark world, the power to rule the world and sweep everything, and so on. She had always had a goal in her life. When many so-called young talents in the dark world of East Island worshipped her as a goddess, those people never existed in her eyes. At the beginning, her master Shinichi Miyamoto, the supreme ninja of the invincible realm who supported Liuhua Palace and made it as famous as Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Training School, was incomparably lofty in her heart. At that time, the only thing Mai Shiranui wanted was to inherit everything from her master and lead Liuhua Palace to surpass Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace to become a super force in the dark world. After Shinichi Miyamoto died in the hands of tribulation, her target became Li Kuangtu. The Purgatory of Heaven capital appeared in East Island. At that time, the man with the code name God, holding a death scythe, was quiet and almost invisible most of the time, but he could fight tit for tat with Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong without falling behind. He indeed had the glory that shone on the whole dark world. Mai Shiranui didn't want to admit it, but she knew very well that in the most glorious years of the Purgatory of Heaven capital in East Island, she had many sleepless nights because of Li Kuangtu. His almost desperate power became something she was crazy about and also the driving force for her continuous progress. She longed to be conquered by such a man and to be owned by such a man. Age? Appearance? None of these things mattered to her. When she tossed and turned countless nights, she could even disdain the pursuit of the royal crown prince. At that time, there was only the incomparable power in her eyes. She dreamed of becoming Li Kuangtu's woman, sleeping beside him, wearing Li Kuangtu's invincible aura, and enjoying the awe of the whole dark world. Mai Shiranui could see that Li Kuangtu was tempted by her. Many times, she could feel the rising temperature in Li Kuangtu's eyes. However, whether it was the royal prince who accompanied Li Kuangtu or Phoenix of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, they all regarded her as a great threat and guarded her so tightly that there was no suitable opportunity. Li Kuangtu was indeed lustful, but he was not the kind of person who was desperate. If he didn't have the chance to eat her, he wouldn't force her. That was the most glorious years of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Now it seemed that it was also the peak period of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. After the chaos in Snow Country, the Purgatory of Heaven capital began to fall from the peak at a speed that no one expected. Wang Tianzong's breakthrough completely suppressed the powerful aura on Li Kuangtu. The Purgatory of Heaven capital left East Island. Countless forces in the dark world were withering. Emperor Dong's palace rose strongly. During that time, Mai Shiranui was lost and confused. The support for the Purgatory of Heaven capital and the account to East Island pressed her hard at that time. She didn't know who to rely on and completely lost her goal. Until the end, she found that she could only rely on her own strength. So Liuhua Palace quietly cut off the relationship with the Purgatory of Heaven capital. The invincible image of Li Kuangtu that was once deeply rooted in her heart had collapsed. So when she did this, she found that she actually had no burden in her heart. She drew a clear line with the Purgatory of Heaven capital and even quietly swallowed a lot of the benefits that belonged to the Purgatory of Heaven capital. She benefited from both the Purgatory of Heaven capital and East Island. Liuhua Palace was getting stronger and stronger, and her personal strength was constantly breaking through. She thought that she had seen the future that she once looked forward to approaching, and she saw the light of hope coming from a distant place. Then the shadow that spread from Jianghu state quietly spread to East Island. There was no sign. It was natural, like the sun rising and the moon setting. The world was supposed to be like this. The shadow spread in Jianghu state. It was dark and silent, but it emitted a pretentious light. It shrouded East Island and quickly shrouded the entire dark world. It was no longer the era of Sword Emperor and deity. Under the shadow that shrouded the dark world was the absolutely invincible light of East Emperor. It was cold, majestic, awe-inspiring, deep, and immovable like a mountain. It was a shadow that completely made the entire East Island feel completely desperate. But Mai Shiranui actually found that she didn't feel the least bit unwilling in her heart. The kind of almost fanatical worship and admiration for Li Kuangtu was like magma that had cooled down and erupted again, from the depths of her heart in an even more unstoppable manner. Mai Shiranui would eventually remember the first confrontation and meeting between her and Li Tianlan in East Island a few years ago. At that time, she, who was proud and arrogant, never thought that one day she would be so eager to be conquered and even ravaged by that man. She was the goddess in the hearts of many people in East Island, and she was a powerhouse in the hearts of many people in the dark world. Women in the dark world never meant that they were weak, because no matter which era, there were women standing at the peak who showed the demeanor of women. More than 20 years ago, there was Summer Solstice and Li Shi, two powerhouses who could be regarded as the peak combat power in the dark world. There was Bai Qingxian, a powerful figure who had begun to strive for the parliament. There was the female Prime Minister of England, and there was Rothschild King Tong, who controlled the Shadow Throne. In the era before Li Tianlan, there was the silent but thunderous Samsara Palace Master who supported the entire Samsara Palace. There was Situ Tsanyue, the hidden god of Jianghu state who guarded Mount Taibai alone but radiated sharpness. There was the Holy Virgin Angel who controlled great power in the Holy Land. So the dark world was never lonely. It was the world of men, but women also had a bright sharpness that couldn't be ignored. In this era, there was Qin Weibai, the patriarch of the Lin clan, who had faded away and stayed with Qin Weibai but no one dared to ignore. There was Dongqing Qiuqi, who had now ascended to the high position of governor in Jianghu. There was Bai Yu, the genius of Jade Pool who had begun to touch the threshold of the invincible realm. There was Mai Shiranui, who supported Liuhua Palace alone in East Island. There were many others. Mai Shiranui was not the most dazzling among these people, but her sharpness couldn't be ignored. Many people thought that Mai Shiranui would also become a dazzling figure who stood at the peak of the dark world and represented all the women of this era in the future. She was indifferent, arrogant, holy, noble, inviolable, and inviolable. People could only look at her from afar, admire her from the bottom of their hearts, and dream about her. This was the view of countless people in East Island about Mai Shiranui. But Mai Shiranui felt that she was a bitch. She had a beautiful appearance, excellent talent, and an extraordinary identity, but she was also a bitch with a strong servility. This was not to belittle herself, but her self-awareness that was difficult for others to talk about. From Li Kuangtu to Li Tianlan. She couldn't resist that kind of power. This year, she was 26 years old. She couldn't be said to be young, but she was definitely not old either. Her body was still delicate, no longer immature, and there was a trace of maturity. She was an age that became more attractive in everyone's eyes. Under Donghuang's shadow, she longed to get Li Tianlan's approval, to be conquered by Li Tianlan, to pull her over, to kneel at his feet, and to press her proud and beautiful head to accept something. She longed for Li Tianlan to throw her on the bed and tear her expensive clothes into pieces. She longed for Li Tianlan to crash and ravage her like a beast and eat her up bit by bit in her screams. There would even be whips, candles, or other things she had seen in East Island that she didn't care about before but secretly looked forward to when they were on Li Tianlan. She longed for Li Tianlan to use everything she had under her goddess halo and enjoy her most docile and charming side. Her charm wanted to bloom around Li Tianlan. That might be a kind of light that blended with Li Tianlan's light. She would wear the dazzling light of Donghuang and announce to the whole dark world that she was Donghuang's woman and enjoy the awe of the whole dark world. As long as she thought about it, it was a kind of pleasure that made her almost breathless. But Li Tianlan didn't say yes. He refused her request to be his woman, but he told himself that he needed a personal maid. The goddess in the hearts of East Island people. The maid of Donghuang. Mai Shiranui even thought it was very interesting. So she came to Emperor Dong's palace and even carefully prepared a lot of things. Mai Shiranui would never forget the strange expression on Xiao Mahai's face when he checked her luggage and found something like a whip in her suitcase. There were even some inconspicuous but interesting gadgets that could only be bought in East Island. Mai Shiranui didn't care. At that time, she burst into an extremely charming smile in front of Xiao Mahai and said that His Majesty Donghuang asked her to bring it with him. There was no look of contempt in his eyes. She could even see a touch of pure awe and flattery in Xiao Mahai's eyes at that time. That feeling made Mai Shiranui's legs weak and her eyes a little misty. She was very sure that this was what she wanted. She knew that she could not break the limit of the invincible realm and enter the realm that she had never reached before. But she could lie docilely beside Li Tianlan, and the whole dark world would also fear and flatter her. Her Liuhua palace could also become a superpower, even if she was not in the invincible realm, even if she was just an ordinary person who didn't know martial arts. Mai Shiranui thought quietly. Her face was a little flushed, and she rubbed her legs unconsciously, feeling that she was going to take a bath again. What are you thinking about? Li Tianlan's voice suddenly rang out in the brightly lit living room. Mai Shiranui's whole body shook. She didn't get up at first, but unconsciously made a sound like a cat's meow, soft, delicate, mellow, and sentimental. The blue veins on Li Tianlan's forehead jumped for no reason, and a nefarious fire almost uncontrollably rose from his abdomen. Your Majesty. Mai Shiranui stood up with a flushed face, a little cramped and a little flustered. A very subtle smell spread on her body. Li Tianlan glanced at her and asked directly, "Where is your room?" Mai Shiranui froze for a moment, as if she couldn't believe it, but with some expectation, she said softly, "It's next to yours. I cleaned it up myself." Your Majesty, would you like to have a look? Li Tianlan waved his hand and said, "Now, go and have a rest. I'll call you if I need anything." Mai Shiranui stood where she was, stunned for a moment, then gave a soft, "Oh," and turned to leave. Li Tianlan glanced at her unconsciously, only to find that Mai Shiranui's delicate white dress swayed gently as she walked, and a small wet mark was gradually growing. He frowned and didn't think much about it. He asked casually, "What's the situation in East Island now?" East Island was undoubtedly the priority at the moment. With Mai Shiranui, a chess piece, there shouldn't be too much trouble. Mai Shiranui paused and turned around. Her watery eyes became more and more hazy, and she said in a soft voice, "It's chaotic, and they're scared." Li Tianlan nodded thoughtfully. Mai Shiranui stared at him for a while, then turned around in disappointment and walked back to her room. The door of the room was gently closed, and then opened again, leaving a very clear gap. After a while, the tempting pink light peeked out from the gap. Li Tianlan suddenly smiled, and his smile was a little happy. He suddenly thought of Li Huaqing. He could probably understand some of Li Huaqing's thoughts. Li Huaqing began to show his own power. And he came to Tiannan probably because he was afraid that Li Tianlan would do the most extreme thing, which was also the reaction he least wanted to see. It was really a wonderful move. The domestic war was tit for tat. Did he think he could control the situation just by looking at him here? At this time, if he left Xianyuan City, Li Tianlan suddenly wanted to see Li Huaqing's reaction. Chapter 12-17. When military counselor called him, Li Tianlan was about to finish watching a classic Hollywood action blockbuster. The movie had come to the end. The overwhelming wreckage of machinery was flying in the fire, and the soldiers with shields were fighting fiercely with the muscular giants. In the distance was a ruined city, and the survivors were running for their lives. All kinds of high-tech weapons were unscrupulously blooming destructive flames in the air, and the endless legions were moving forward firmly in the surging artillery fire. One picture after another was reflected in his dull pupils. He sat quietly, like a puppet, with countless thoughts flashing in his mind, about East Island, about South America, about Europe. The urgent reorganization of the internal structure of Emperor Dong's palace, the establishment of various departments, the blueprint of the new group, the game with Li Huaqing, the various investments of the Flourishing Age Fund, the future of Tiannan, his future, everything seemed to explode at once. Everything had to be done, and they had to be done as soon as possible. He didn't pay attention to what the movie was about. It was destined to be a blockbuster without too many connotations. The scenes were gorgeous and hot-blooded, and the special effects were all on. Li Tianlan's thoughts were scattered with the special effects on the screen. He looked quieter and quieter, sitting on the sofa motionlessly. Time was silent, and so was he. Gradually, he was so quiet as if he didn't exist at all. The phone rang. Li Tianlan's body moved slightly. He seemed to come alive all of a sudden. He exhaled softly, turned off the TV in front of him, picked up the phone, and said, Your Majesty, Yuzhou is a little lively. Military counselor's voice was still calm, and he came straight to the point. He used the word lively very vividly. In fact, Yuzhou was more than lively now. Li Huaqing suddenly came to Emperor Dong's palace. Such an abrupt move directly shocked the whole Jianghu state, and Yuzhou was now in a state of complete uproar. The parliament had not yet held a meeting to formally announce or issue any orders. But all kinds of heavyweights had begun to meet frequently. Zhou Mulan and Bai Zhanfang were secretly meeting. According to the exact news, an hour ago, Wu Jingmin, the deputy minister of the cabinet, also arrived at the Bai family's manor. Bai Qingzhao went to the building of the military department overnight. It was said that among the four spirits of Jianghu state, besides Li Huaqing, the black tortoise who was stationed in Tiannan, azure dragon, white tiger, and the new vermilion bird had all received orders to return to Yuzhou with their terracotta soldiers. Ji Wenzhang, Wan Qingyun, and Yi Dongsheng had also started secretly contacting each other an hour ago. Guo Wendian seemed ready to leave for Southwest City. The speaker of the North City arrived at Yuzhou province overnight and entered Zhou Yunhai's home. Not only the parliament, but also some powerful figures in Jianghu state had received the news and began to discuss the possible changes. Hua Zhengyang's phone was ringing off the hook. Countless powerful people expressed their opinions one after another. Some hoped that Li Huaqing could be more cautious, and some hoped that Xianyuan City could take a step back. As the current CEO of Emperor Dong's palace, the military counselor also received calls from different people. Some wanted to strengthen cooperation, while others wanted to shelve previous cooperation plans. It was a complete mess. Demons danced in a frenzy. The turbulence had begun to spread to the entire Jianghu state from Yuzhou as the center. In 24 hours at most, the roaring hurricane would sweep across the entire Jianghu state. Is it exciting? Li Tianlan asked with a smile and a relaxed tone while holding the phone. Military counselor was silent for about half a minute. Obviously, he did not expect Li Tianlan's attitude to be like this at this time. Then he laughed and said, I've experienced such a battle once, and I'm used to it. Your Majesty, the timing is a bit sensitive now, you know. Of course, Li Tianlan could understand what the so-called timing sensitivity meant. The problem of Li Huaqing had now become the focus between the academics and Emperor Dong's palace. Neither side would give in. Li Huaqing's arrival in Emperor Dong's palace made everyone a little uneasy. But before the situation changed, the uneasiness was just uneasiness. They would wait and see, look for opportunities, and express their attitudes at the right time. The so-called right time was undoubtedly when the confrontation between the academics and Emperor Dong's palace had a clear winner. But now, there was a big movement in Yuzhou. It was no longer as simple as waiting and seeing. The academics and Emperor Dong's palace had stirred up chaos. Now, all the other groups and wealthy families were obviously ready to take action and showed signs of entering the fray. Why? There might be a lot of reasons. But there should be only a few of them who really wanted to help the academics or Emperor Dong's palace. The most important reason was because of the election. The eve of every election in Jianghu state was the most lively time. The situation seemed calm, but only the people in the game could really see the stormy waves. When it came to the group, every group had their own demands and wanted to complete their own layout. When it came to individuals, everyone also had their own goals. The relationship between each other, the competition inside and outside the group, and the cooperation in various fields were a complete mess. Everyone was fighting, for a certain position, for a certain side's benefits. From top to bottom, the fighting was endless, spreading to every domain, every group. It was a chaotic battle. Of course, the negotiation had to be negotiated. But just like Li Huaqing and Li Tianlan now, before the negotiation, both sides wanted to show their strength. Only with great strength could their words be taken seriously, respected, and even accepted. There was less than a year before the election. Undoubtedly, the major groups also wanted to show their strength. Only then would they have more bargaining chips and be able to ask for more things. Is it going to start now? Li Tianlan smiled and looked out of the window at the night that seemed to be gradually fading away. Xianyuan city in winter was still as warm as spring, but his body still remembered the coldness that pervaded Yuzhou. He narrowed his eyes and shook his head, saying, "It's not the new year yet. It seems a little early. Because a lot of things need to be redistributed. Our appearance has impacted the structure of the six, and many people have long been unable to hold back." Military counselor's voice was a little understated. "So in your opinion, is it a good thing or a bad thing for Emperor Dong's palace this time?" "Neither good nor bad." The military counselor laughed. "Everyone who enters the game has good intentions, but no one knows what kind of accident will happen until the end. We can only do what we should do. No matter if it's good or bad, we still need to operate." Li Tianlan's voice was more understated, even a little careless. "Well, what can you do?" Military counselor didn't speak for a while. He didn't know whether to give Li Tianlan a thumbs up or a middle finger in his heart. Li Tianlan's words, whether in an understated tone or a careless tone, were the essence of the boss. Li Tianlan's casual words obviously meant that the next task would be handed over to him. However, as the CEO of Emperor Dong's palace, it seemed to be his task indeed. This sentence was undoubtedly Li Tianlan's statement, which meant that military counselor could use all the resources that Emperor Dong's palace currently had to obtain greater benefits for Emperor Dong's palace in the next chaotic battle. As the supreme leader of Emperor Dong's palace, if Li Tianlan bowed to everything personally, the existence of military counselor and others would undoubtedly be meaningless. Li Tianlan was self-aware. He had indeed come to this position, but in terms of skill, layout, power, experience, he was not able to perfectly control all the internal details of a group. At the very least, he was not as good as military counselor in this respect. He just knew what he wanted and where Emperor Dong's palace would be next. This kind of thing involved the main strategic direction, but not the specific operation process, and Li Tianlan was competent. The goal of the new group after the election was very clear. In the case of keeping Jianghu, they would take down the 4 provinces of Nanyue, Xia, Dongshan, and Jiangnan. In the case of perfecting the internal promotion system of the group, they would try their best to conquer the cabinet and occupy a relatively strong position. With the 5 provinces and Tiannan as the foundation, the radiating influence and the power of the cabinet would support each other. In the overall strategy of the whole Jianghu state, resources would be inclined to Emperor Dong's palace to a certain extent, and it would protect the integration of the new group, the giant group, and the North group. This was the strategic direction of Emperor Dong's palace in Jianghu state in the next 10 years that Li Tianlan had personally formulated. The next implementation, the allocation of a large number of resources, and the operation of human relations were the responsibility of the CEO military counselor. Li Tianlan gave the direction to lead Emperor Dong's palace. He didn't care about the process, only the final result. I'm on my way to the Bai family manor. On the phone, military counselor smiled gently. He was the CEO of Emperor Dong's palace, but after all, he had nothing to do with the parliament of Jianghu state. On the surface, he was just a businessman. At this time, he naturally had to unite all the forces that could be united to intervene in this chaotic battle. Dongxing Wudi was still in Emperor Dong's palace. At present, Zhou Mulan and Bai Zhanfang represented the giant group in Yuzhou. And Wu Jingmin represented the power of the new group. Military counselor represented Emperor Dong's palace. Only when he, the CEO, was present could the power of the new group and the giant group operate smoothly and prepare for the next chaotic battle. The first thing we have to face is the academy. Military counselor's voice was very quiet and calm. In the chaos, his slow voice had a kind of reassuring and trustworthy power. Your Majesty, what are you going to do about Li Kuangtu? Li Tianlan was silent for a moment. Do we fight to the end? Or can we compromise? I can operate in Yuzhou, but first we have to be mentally prepared. Your decision means different results. The current situation is that our conflict with the academies has caused the current chaos. This is not a good thing, but it is not a bad thing either. At least to a certain extent, it shows that the initiative is in our hands, not in the hands of the academies. If we fight to the end, the first thing we have to face is the full attack of the academies. In this position, Li Huaqing can't be ignored. Once we fall into a disadvantageous position, other forces who don't want the new group to appear will undoubtedly attack us together. It's hard for us to resist, but once we do, our gains will be far beyond expectations. It's risky to fight to the end, but the benefits are also great. If we compromise, we can make full use of the initiative in our hands. When to compromise and when to hand Li Kuangtu over to the parliament, these are completely up to us. We can even use this to exchange something with the academies. Before the election, our preparation will be more leisurely. At present, compromise is a relatively rational choice. It's less risky and very safe. Military counselor's voice was clear and definite. So you prefer me to let him go? Li Tianlan asked. Military counselor seemed to think about the emotion in Li Tianlan's tone and finally said cautiously, "Everything is up to your Majesty. I'm in charge." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes slightly and didn't speak for a while. He was indeed hesitant about how to deal with Li Kuangtu. Li Kuangtu's hostility to him was extremely obvious, but perhaps it was because of some fixed but later broken understanding of Li Kuangtu since childhood, or because of Dongqing Rushi, or because of the sword Li Kuangtu lent him in Reki City. It was because of the sword that Li Kuangtu had lent him in Reki City, or something else that he couldn't tell himself. Therefore, even though Li Tianlan now had the strength above Li Kuangtu, he didn't want to kill him very much. Jiang Shanyu might have also seen this. So he forcibly took Gu Xingyin away and left Li Kuangtu. At that time, Li Tianlan could have killed Li Kuangtu countless times in an instant, but in the end, he chose to take him back to Emperor Dong's palace. From the perspective of Emperor Dong's palace, keeping Li Kuangtu here and waiting for the situation to stabilize, Li Tianlan could already get up and go to Heaven Capital in Tiannan and use Li Kuangtu as a bargaining chip to take over the entire purgatory of Heaven Capital. There was a saying in ancient times that one could order the vassals by holding the emperor by force. It was not accurate to use it here. Li Kuangtu was not the emperor, but the meaning was not much different. As long as he controlled Li Kuangtu, taking over the purgatory of Heaven Capital would be a matter of time. Those who were inclined to him no longer had to hesitate and would willingly join Emperor Dong's palace. Even those who were loyal to Li Kuangtu, such as Dawn, Daybreak, and Phoenix, would join because Li Kuangtu was under the control of Emperor Dong's palace and become the sword of Emperor Dong's palace. Situ Tsanyue's occasional trance would not appear again. The relationship between Sai City and Mount Shu would gradually ease. Li Shi didn't have to recall the past. Keeping Li Kuangtu would be an explanation to Dongqing Rushi, her grandfather, and the Li family. As long as Emperor Dong controlled Li Kuangtu, Emperor Dong's palace could get a lot of things. From the perspective of Emperor Dong's palace, the parliament would also give him generous compensation if he handed over Li Kuangtu. Dongqing Wudi brought Li Huaqing's bargaining chip. In the communication with Li Huaqing not long ago, he also explained it calmly. Beijiang was undoubtedly a piece of fat meat. But Li Huaqing didn't mean to exchange the position of the cabinet. In principle, he still supported Bai Qingxian to go to the cabinet. He could also support Wu Jingmin to serve as a director and deputy prime minister. He would also support Zhou Yuanshan to go to Nanyue. Li Huaqing's original intention was to promote Wu Jingmin's first secretary, Jian Kang, who was now in Jianghu and had a very pleasant cooperation with Zhou Yuanshan and Dongqing Chuqi, to the parliament of Zhongzhou state and let him take charge of Beijiang. Jian Kang's qualifications were undoubtedly insufficient. Even among dozens of provincial speakers in Zhongzhou state, his qualifications were the least, but his ability was beyond doubt. If Beijiang was handed over to Jian Kang, Li Tianlan would rest assured, and Zhongzhou state would also rest assured. The strategic significance of Beijiang was far more than just a member of parliament. That was the largest province in Zhongzhou state. It could be said to be vast and resourceful, but it could also be said to be sparsely populated. There were too many things that could be done in that land, no matter what could be said or not. If the new group took over Beijiang, after the election, they would undoubtedly become one of the top groups in Zhongzhou state. And not only the new group, but also Li Huaqing's concession to the Border Control Corps also meant that as long as Li Tianlan handed over Li Kuangtu, the giant group could also get great benefits. This was the condition that Li Huaqing put forward. And it was certain that this was not all the conditions, but the most tempting one. As long as Li Tianlan was willing to talk about other details, there was absolutely room for discussion. Therefore, in the so-called overall situation of Emperor Dong's palace, it was beneficial to Emperor Dong's palace whether to release him or not. The difference was that if he didn't release him, he would get the purgatory of heaven capital, but he would have to resist the pressure from the parliament of Zhongzhou state. And if he released him, he would get a large number of bargaining chips headed by Beijiang, but in the future, he would have to face the joint forces of Li Kuangtu, Gu Xingyun, and Jiang Shanyu. Li Tianlan was not afraid of making enemies. He was not even afraid that Li Kuangtu would enter the supreme realm in the spiritual domain first. He just didn't want to be enemies with Li Kuangtu and the purgatory of heaven capital represented by Li Kuangtu. The brand of the Li family on the purgatory of heaven capital was so obvious. It could be said that he was indecisive, soft-hearted, or hesitant. Li Tianlan really didn't want to fight against them. That was tantamount to cutting off the beliefs he had grown up with, distorting his life, and making the future more meaningless. And Li Huaqing and the parliament of Zhongzhou state were now undoubtedly forcing him and the Li family represented by Li Kuangtu to go against each other. Li Tianlan held the phone and said after a while, "Let's wait and see. Things have to be done first. Don't be too anxious." Military counselor smiled on the other end of the phone. Now both sides are still at the stage of showing their strength. The second before the real showdown is the time for your majesty to consider. Li Tianlan said, I probably know what Li Huaqing wants to do. Military counselor continued, our intelligence department has received the news. Li Huaqing should want to re-establish the order of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou state. He has talked with Gu Xingyun and Jiang Shanyu. Li Kuangtu is also an indispensable part of his plan. In Li Huaqing's expectation, in the future, the special warfare system of Zhongzhou state will set up several new corps as the core pillars of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou state. Kunlun Corps, Commander Gu Xingyun, the main force is the current elite of Kunlun City. Heaven Capital Corps, Commander Li Kuangtu, the main force is the current elite of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. The third one, the source of the news is a little vague. It should be called the Shadow Legion, Commander Jiang Shanyu. The specific composition of the personnel is unknown. In addition, there is the Snowdance Corps and the Nightmare Corps of Emperor Dong's palace, led by Your Majesty. It seems that the parliament will also give the special warfare system more power to speak. In short, Li Huaqing is very generous, and it can be seen that he is very sincere. Military counselor's quiet and deep voice kept echoing. Li Tianlan held the phone and did not speak for a long time. Chapter 12:18. Li Tianlan could sense Li Huaqing's sincerity. If what the military advisor said was true, then Li Huaqing's actions could indeed be said to be very generous. To rebuild the order of the special warfare system of Jianghu state and break the inherent concept, in a series of adjustments, Gu Xingyun would step down and Li Tianlan would step up quietly. In this case, Gu Xingyun could be regarded as losing all his face. But compared with Li Tianlan directly driving him out of the position of state-protecting war god, the ups and downs in this adjustment at least left the last trace of face for Gu Xingyun, and it could make him more reasonable to find a lot of excuses. Snow Dance, Nightmare, Kunlun, Tiandu, Umbra. If the 5 regiments were the core pillars of the special warfare system of Jianghu state, then Li Tianlan would undoubtedly have a great advantage when facing others. The Snowdance Corps was originally his trusted team, and the Nightmare Corps was the main structure of Emperor Dong's palace. Of the 5 regiments, he could absolutely control 2. Gu Xingyun, Li Guangtu, and Jiang Shangyu each controlled 1. It seemed that the 3 of them together seemed to be more powerful than Li Tianlan, but it was just an appearance. Not to mention the size and equipment of the 5 legions, and the comparison of combat effectiveness between Li Tianlan and the 3 of them, after Jianghu state made this plan. If Li Tianlan agreed, then the support of the parliament for him would be completely different. This was Li Huaqing's attitude and sincerity. He could give it to Beijiang, Nanyue, Xia, Dongshan, and Jiangnan, but he wouldn't touch Zhejiang either. If you want the initiative of the special warfare system, I can give it to you. If they wanted to support him, the parliament would not hesitate. The whole Jianghu state had already determined that Li Tianlan would be their real irreplaceable guardian in the next few decades, so Li Huaqing's attitude was very obvious. I can give you what you want. If you want to be promoted, I will personally push you up. What I want is just a part of the living space for others. Will you give it to me? From the perspective of Emperor Dong's palace and the purgatory of heaven capital, Li Huaqing was interfering in the internal affairs of the Li family. From the perspective of the special warfare system of Jianghu state, Li Tianlan was also trying to monopolize all the resources of Jianghu state. Arrogant, despotic, and domineering. Who was the one going too far? Li Tianlan hung up the phone and lit a cigarette. He got up from the sofa with some irritation and went to the huge and bright French window. Outside the window was the tranquil and beautiful night scene of Emperor Dong's palace. There were no bustling lights. Standing on the 6th floor of the castle, one could see water splashing silently into the air, flat and clean lawns, quietly swaying flowers and grass, clear flowing lake water, quiet wind, and bright stars and moon. Li Tianlan smoked and remained silent. He didn't like this feeling. He really didn't like it. This was a clear and obvious feeling of being bound by something. He had reached the peak, but he had not walked out of the restrictions of the rules. From the second Li Huaqing came to Tiannan, Li Tianlan was very aware of a problem. He was indeed invincible. However, it wasn't as if he couldn't be destroyed. He stood at the pinnacle of this world that contained countless factors, rules, regulations, laws, clear barriers, clear standpoints, the glint of swords, mutual deception, carnage, conspiracies and betrayals, battles and killings. It was a world that was filled with games, negotiations, concessions, compromises, balance, ups and downs. It seemed magnificent, but it was actually a world that was constantly repeating itself. However, he was still tightly restricted by countless rules and could not be free. The crazy development of Emperor Dong's palace, power, wealth, and status, all of them were like shackles wrapped around him. He could clearly see those shining responsibilities, and he could clearly feel his exhaustion, annoyance, and even powerlessness. He wanted his life to move forward, but countless things were telling him that he had to take this step back. He didn't want to get involved in the chaos before the election. He didn't want to play games with Li Huaqing. He didn't want to hand over Li Kuang to Beijiang, the parliament, the future, the country, they were all F***king things. If he didn't want to do something, then he wouldn't do it. If he fell out with Li Kuang too, he would do it. At worst, Emperor Dong's palace would be destroyed. He would leave Zhongzhou state and kill all the people he wanted to kill. He would move forward and never look back. He wanted to do this, but he could only think about it. Reality and fantasy were different, and they would never be the same. His invincible power had brought him absolute power and wealth to the peak of the world. Now, he would have to carry these things on his back and do things that he didn't want to do. For example, he was trying to guess Li Huaqing's thoughts and bottom line, and he would fight for the greatest benefits in this chaotic battle. This was his life and future, and he seemed to be able to see the end with a single glance. Li Tianlan threw away the cigarette butt, took out another one, lit it, and took a deep breath. A white, soft, and slender arm stretched out. There was an ashtray in the slender fingers. A wisp of very pleasant fragrance came from beside him. It was not like the natural body fragrance of Qin Weibai, but it carried a kind of very seductive temptation. The owner of the arm stood quietly beside Li Tianlan, silent and gentle. Li Tianlan didn't say anything, just flicked the ash into the ashtray. The soft arm holding the ashtray was motionless. The cigarette burned out, and Li Tianlan lit another. After smoking 3 cigarettes in a row, he took a deep breath, and the depression in his heart seemed to be exhaled bit by bit with the smoke. Li Tianlan's voice was calm, and he said blandly, "Why don't you rest?" "I can't sleep." Mai Shiranui shook her head gently, took back the ashtray, and squatted down to pick up the cigarette but that Li Tianlan had thrown on the ground and put it in. Women in East Island were generally petite and exquisite. Mai Shiranui, who was 1.65 meters tall, was already considered tall in East Island, but in the face of Li Tianlan, who was 1.83 meters tall, she still needed to raise her head slightly. She raised her big bright eyes, and her long eyelashes trembled slightly. She looked at Li Tianlan, a little obsessed and a little absent-minded. She remembered the first time she met Li Tianlan. At that time, in East Island, she wore a red cheongsam, looking at Li Tianlan proudly and indifferently, with a condescending mockery. At that time, Li Tianlan was not as tall as he was now. Mai Shiranui smiled and said in a soft voice, "And master, you haven't slept yet." "How dare I sleep?" Her magnetic and sweet voice trembled slightly under the soft light, and her face quietly crept up with a touch of captivating red. In the past 20 years of life, this was the first time she had called a man of the opposite sex master. It was not a joke, but a voluntary expression of her meekness and submission. She didn't want to call this man His Majesty. That was what everyone in Emperor Dong's palace called him. There were many people in Emperor Dong's palace, and there would be more and more people in the future. Li Tianlan would get more and more used to the title, Your Majesty. He would become accustomed to it and even numb to it. Maybe one day when everyone called Li Tianlan, Your Majesty, Li Tianlan would forget his own name, let alone who had called him, Your Majesty. At that time, Mai Shiranui, who also called him, Your Majesty, might be like other inconspicuous people. Her gender, position, and identity would be blurred. In the end, she would be like a non-existent shadow. Mai Shiranui didn't want that. So she let go of her pride and reserve and called Li Tianlan master. She was already his maid, so she should call him master. She felt a sense of intimacy as if she was owned by him. Mai Shiranui was a little excited. Li Tianlan glanced at her, expressionless. Mai Shiranui, who was still dressed in a pure white suit, turned around and put down the ashtray. With a burst of fragrance, she poured a glass of water for Li Tianlan and said softly, "Master, if you don't want to rest, would you like to taste the tea ceremony that has been passed down in the Mai Shiranui family for a long time?" Li Tianlan took the glass and took a sip. He said lightly, "I want to drink wine, strong wine." "I'll get it." Mai Shiranui turned around with a chuckle. Her long hair flew, and her slender waist swayed gently. She came and went like the wind. In the dead of night. Beauty and strong wine. Li Tianlan's heart was restless, but it had nothing to do with desire. In the corner of the living room, there was a wine cabinet of moderate size, in which all kinds of famous wines were neatly placed, dazzling. In fact, Li Tianlan was not very interested in wine. The wine cabinet was also brought by Qin Weibai. She preferred to drink a little grape wine or red wine before going to bed, and Li Tianlan would drink some with her. However, Qin Weibai lived here for a short time, so the wine cabinet still looked full. Mai Shiranui did not touch the foreign vodka and the like. She bent down and turned out a bottle of high alcohol content Maotai, took 2 crystal glasses and put them in front of Li Tianlan, and then called the number 2 restaurant. The number 2 restaurant was on the 5th floor of the castle. It was a small cafeteria. Compared with the number 1 restaurant, the chef's skills and ingredients were nothing special. They were all top chefs transferred by Han Donglu from the hotels under the Flourishing Age Fund. However, the number of chefs in the number 2 restaurant was very small. There were about 20 people in the dessert, Western, and Chinese dishes. To put it bluntly, they served Li Tianlan alone. They worked in 2 shifts and were on call 24 hours a day. Li Tianlan's time in Emperor Dong's palace was very short, so the number 2 restaurant became a special place for the high-level officials of Emperor Dong's palace. Mai Shiranui did not know much about Zhongzhou cuisine. She just said that His Majesty wanted to drink. Listening to her stiff but charming Chinese, Li Tianlan opened the bottle and filled the 2 crystal glasses in front of him. Mai Shiranui, who was talking on the phone, watched this scene. Her watery eyes were shining, and the corners of her soft lips were gently raised. Putting down the phone, Mai Shiranui stood up as she picked up the glass, walked to Li Tianlan, and bent down as if she wanted to sit close to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan glanced at her and pointed to the sofa opposite him. Mai Shiranui was a little embarrassed. After a stalemate for less than a second, she finally pursed her lips and sat back. "Tell me about East Island," Li Tianlan said in a flat tone. Mai Shiranui was stunned. Holding the glass, she said slowly, "East Island is in chaos now." This was an inevitable phenomenon. With the destruction of Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Training School, the dark world of East Island without a martial arts grand master was completely leaderless. Under such circumstances, it was difficult for other forces in East Island to really understand the situation in the shortest time, so chaos naturally occurred. They wanted to rise, but they didn't have the strength. So it was foreseeable that such chaos would not end in a short time under normal circumstances. But East Island was not in a normal situation now. Emperor Dong's palace would inevitably intervene in everything in the dark world of East Island. The royals who had been in control of all this might object, but their objection was meaningless. Emperor Dong's palace was invincible. When the elites of Nightmare Troop wiped out the remaining forces of East Island, what could the royals use to oppose Li Tianlan? Did they have to send troops to suppress them on a large scale in their own country? Not to mention whether they could do this, even if they did, Emperor Dong's palace, which was backed by Zhongzhou state, was not something they could suppress at will. If they dared to move, the incident would undoubtedly escalate. Fight with Zhongzhou state. When these words were put together, no other country in the world had such confidence. When its special warfare system was completely destroyed and scattered, and the remaining stragglers didn't have the strength to protect their own territory, the strong intervention of external forces was unavoidable. Under such circumstances, the royals could at most give those stragglers some symbolic support. But when the external force that intervened was Emperor Dong's palace, the royals might not even have the courage to give their own people symbolic support. Some of the elites of Nightmare Troop were still in East Island, and they occupied Wangtian Pavilion, the former headquarters of Purgatory of Heaven Capital and Heaven Capital. There were not many of them, just 200 elites, and only 2 of them were in the thunder-shocking realm. This kind of lineup was nothing in the eyes of East Island, and there was more than one force that could completely suppress this lineup. But so far, no one dared to target these 200 elites. This showed their rationality to some extent. But at the same time, none of the forces had come into contact with this group of elites. This also showed how conflicted they were. But all of this was meaningless. Whether they were rational or conflicted, Emperor Dong's palace would march into East Island in an unstoppable manner. Those who obeyed it would prosper, and those who disobeyed it would die. The smartest way for East Island at present was to contact Emperor Dong's palace. It didn't matter if they didn't want to or not. But now that their special warfare system was about to be lost, they could only bow their heads, and to some extent, test the opportunity to cooperate with Emperor Dong's palace. The royals really want you to go to East Island, Master. I think they should have a lot of things to talk to you about, but I guess they don't dare to leave East Island and come here. My Shiranui winked charmingly. If there's a chance, I'll go there. Li Tianlan took a sip of wine and said casually, how's the strength of Liuhua Regiment now? Liuhua Regiment, a familiar and confused look flashed in my Shiranui's beautiful big eyes. She had never heard of Liuhua Regiment, but somehow she felt the name was familiar. After a full 10 seconds, she finally realized why this name was so familiar. Her master casually took her from East Island, and the goddess of the special warfare system of East Island became Donghuang's personal maid. That was it? How could it be? Now it was just an understatement. Liuhua Palace, the force that used to be as famous as Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace, the force that once had a supreme ninja of the invincible realm, the force that even surrendered to the purgatory of heaven capital, was still called Liuhua Palace. Between Li Tianlan's words, it had completely disappeared. From now on, there was no Liuhua Palace in East Island. The former ninja Holy Land was now the Liuhua Regiment. The Liuhua Regiment that belonged to Emperor Dong's palace. They were no longer a subsidiary force, but a part of Emperor Dong's palace. My Shiranui looked at Li Tianlan in a daze. The entire Liuhua Palace seemed to have been subdued by Li Tianlan's casual toast and careless words just now. This veteran force in East Island was simply drunk by Li Tianlan. It was more delicious than any dish that went with wine. At this moment, Li Tianlan was so calm, but also so domineering. Li Tianlan glanced at her. My Shiranui suddenly came to her senses. The strange thing was that she didn't feel any resistance in her heart. She was so calm as if she had already accepted this fact. She knew what this fact meant. Even when it became a subsidiary force of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, Liuhua Palace still had its own light, and the Purgatory of Heaven capital didn't intervene in the internal affairs of Liuhua Palace. In everyone's eyes, Liuhua Palace was still a local force of East Island, just serving the Purgatory of Heaven capital. For East Island, Liuhua Palace became the Liuhua Regiment, which was the most thorough betrayal. They directly changed from a local force to a plunderer of all kinds of resources in East Island. From now on, how would the special warfare system of East Island think of her? How would Liuhua Palace, no, the Liuhua Regiment, deal with themselves? My Shiranui was silent. She looked deeply into Li Tianlan's eyes. Master. Let me be your woman, okay, my Shiranui suddenly spoke. Her words were inexplicable, and her voice even sounded a little pleading. There's no difference. Li Tianlan said blandly. He took off his shoes casually, stretched out his legs, and put them on my Shiranui's knees. My Shiranui subconsciously straightened her body and hugged Li Tianlan's calf, letting Li Tianlan's feet touch her proud and tender breasts through her white blouse. She leaned forward and gently massaged his calf and feet. Li Tianlan moved his feet comfortably and said blandly, "You and the Liuhua Regiment both belong to me. This has nothing to do with whether we have sex or not. You don't have to worry about how the Liuhua Regiment and you will live in East Island in the future. Do you feel ashamed to face East Island? In fact, from the moment you surrendered to Emperor Dong's palace, you already had no choice. Emperor Dong's palace welcomes the Liuhua Regiment to join us, but you have to be sure of your position. How will the Liuhua Regiment face East Island? You don't have to face it. In the future, the Liuhua Regiment will develop in East Island as a ruler. When everyone has to bow down to you, how can you face it? For them, it makes no difference whether you are my maid or my woman. No matter which identity you have, you will be above them. If they don't recognize the truth, I don't mind washing them with blood again. Feeling Li Tianlan's subconscious slight strength in his feet, Mai Shiranui's body trembled slightly and her breathing quickened. She didn't know whether it was because of excitement or humiliation. She carefully massaged Li Tianlan, biting her lip tightly as she felt his natural indifference and arrogance. Li Tianlan looked at her and slightly narrowed his eyes. In the Liuhua regiment, there are 3 experts above the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, including me. I'm a half-step to the invincible realm, and the other 2 are close to this level. There are 3 experts of the thunder-shocking realm and 190 experts of the fire-flaming realm. This is the main framework of the Liuhua regiment now. When the Purgatory of Heaven capital was in East Island, the Liuhua regiment basically didn't have any combat missions, both internal and external. At that time, Li Kuangtu only asked us for one thing, and that was intelligence. The Liuhua regiment has a deep foundation in East Island, and we have an innate intelligence advantage. So now, the Liuhua regiment can be said to be the #1 intelligence organization in East Island. Almost all the sensitive events in East Island can't be hidden from our intelligence center. Mai Shiranui whispered. With your intelligence advantage, can you find a way to quickly rule the dark world of East Island? Li Tianlan glanced at her. Theoretically, yes. Mai Shiranui nodded gently. Her slender and cool fingers slid across Li Tianlan's calf, bringing a tingling sensation. Li Tianlan understood what the so-called theoretically meant. He nodded and said, I will go to East Island, but only after you have initially established the authority of the Liuhua regiment. Emperor Dong's palace can give you support. You can choose a high-level official from Emperor Dong's palace and let him take some elites to East Island with you. He will serve as the deputy commander of the Liuhua regiment. Mai Shiranui bit her lip, and there was some hidden bitterness in her eyes. Say what you want to say. Li Tianlan said calmly. Master, I have some understanding of some things in Jianghu state. Mai Shiranui said with a smile. For example? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. For example, the more than 30 provincial speakers of Jianghu state. Mai Shiranui smiled elegantly and charmingly. I found that among the more than 30 speakers, some of them have very strange names. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched, and he seemed a little embarrassed. He understood what Mai Shiranui wanted to say. In some places, the names of the speaker and the governor are very strange. Mai Shiranui's eyes were misty. I don't deny their authority. It's just that in those provinces, there is usually a deputy governor or deputy speaker whose division of labor is not very clear. They can be surnamed Li, Wang, Sun, or Sun. Their names are very in line with the style of Jianghu state. It's very normal. Li Tianlan looked at her and said nothing. And in those places, every time something important happens, your news media will intentionally or unintentionally mention the deputy governor whose division of labor is not clear and is even somewhat like a marginal figure. Mai Shiranui blinked her big eyes and looked innocent. Master, why is that? Li Tianlan wanted to pull his foot back, but Mai Shiranui hugged him tightly. Mai Shiranui, who seemed to have completely adapted to the identity of a maid, was constantly stripping away the estrangement and distance between her and Li Tianlan. She pouted her lustrous red lips, as if she was dissatisfied and acting coquettishly. She was about to cry. Master doesn't trust me. You think too much. Li Tianlan shook his head. And it's also wrong. It has nothing to do with trust. You can choose any deputy commander of the Liuhua regiment. He will go with you to East Island, but he will only be a nominal member of the Liuhua regiment. He will not interfere in specific affairs, but will establish a new regiment that belongs to Emperor Dong's palace. He will be a nominal member of the Liuhua regiment, and then it will be easier for you to get in touch. Isn't that distrust? Mai Shiranui's eyes were still resentful. Of course not. Li Tianlan shook his head. He wanted to say something else, but he suddenly froze. He sat on the sofa in a daze, and his eyes became a little dim. Mai Shiranui looked at him carefully, feeling uneasy. She could act coquettishly, she could complain, and she could desperately close the distance between her and Li Tianlan to create a more intimate relationship. This was the embodiment of her cleverness as a woman. But she knew very well when she should show these things and when she should put them away. Li Tianlan picked up the wine glass again and silently drank up more than half of the wine in one gulp. He let out a long breath and looked up at the soft crystal chandelier on the ceiling. At this moment, Li Tianlan finally realized that he had changed unconsciously. Because he thought of Li Huaqing. He thought of Li Huaqing's fierce but strong eyes that showed a touch of fatigue and persistence when he looked at him. "It's not that I don't trust you." Li Tianlan's voice became a little low. "On the contrary, it's because I'm responsible for you." 4. He opened his mouth, and his voice became even lower. Balance. As a special province in Jianghu state that had truly achieved some kind of freedom, the provincial government compound of Beihai province could be said to be the most luxurious provincial government compound in the whole Jianghu state. It used to be a large park in Xingzhou city. When it was renovated for the second time after its completion, it was approved by a patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai into a provincial government compound. It was surrounded by mountains and rivers, far away from the hustle and bustle. Dozens of huge and luxurious 5-story single-family villas were dotted among the green hills and blue waters. The structure had 3 floors above the ground and 2 floors below the ground. It was equipped with elevators, private lawns, private garages, private pools, private gyms, private cinemas, bars, and there was an international golf course inside the park. It could be said to be the real holy land of celebrities in the whole of Beihai. Luxury cars came and went all day and night. It was said that the third phase expansion plan of the provincial government compound had been approved. From the southern part of the provincial government compound, they could even get a small piece of sea area that belonged to the provincial government compound. At that time, a yacht club would be built here to provide entertainment for the speaker and directors. In the past hundreds of years, Beihai had been so ostentatious in various fields. This province was unimaginably comfortable and luxurious compared to other regions of the same level. In the eyes of other regions of Jianghu state, it was indeed a real alien and freak. It was no wonder that Qin Fangqing and even many people before him regarded Beihai as a thorn in their side. They saw the ostentatiousness of Beihai that even they envied, but they did not see, or were unwilling to admit, the calmness behind the ostentatiousness. Beihai maintained a strong autonomy from top to bottom, which made Jianghu state extremely uncomfortable. Most of the laws of Jianghu state applied here, but there were also some laws and rules made by Beihai itself. There was only one dominator in Beihai, and that was Mount Dibbing. Hundreds of years of iron-like facts had proved one thing countless times. If Mount Dibbing was stable, the whole of Beihai would be stable. From the speaker, the governor, the commander of the Beihai Corps, to the deputy speaker, deputy governor, the speaker and mayor of each city, the middle and high officials of each key department, and the grassroots, Jianghu state had the right to make suggestions. But Mount Dibbing had the right to appoint all these people. All this seemed completely incredible today, but it also explained the glory of the Wang family of Beihai from another perspective. Beihai province's high-tech cultivation that had lasted for hundreds of years had made countless people jealous. It had also kept Beihai the core attraction for a large number of smart and capable young people in Jianghu state. Except for the top management, few people in Beihai were transferred to other places. But occasionally, some young and strong people from Jianghu state would be transferred to Beihai. Almost every transfer of a position would cause a lot of trouble. Everyone desperately wanted to work in Beihai, and a considerable part of the reason was the incredible welfare system here. Was there a speaker in Jianghu state with a personal net worth of billions who seemed to be above board and not afraid of being investigated? Yes, in Beihai. Was there a governor in Jianghu state with a personal net worth of billions who was also not afraid of investigation? Yes, also in Beihai. Was there a general in Jianghu state with a personal net worth of billions who was not afraid of investigation? Or in Beihai? In the latest issue of Beihai's salary adjustment, the salary of the speaker of Beihai, the governor of Beihai, and the first deputy commander of the Beihai Corps was 75 million Jianghu dollars. 75 million a year. The second-level director of Beihai had an annual salary of 60 million a year. Non-director deputy governor members had an annual salary of 50 million. As for the cities in Beihai, the mayor of Xingzhou got the salary of a director. The first and second leaders of other cities in key departments at the provincial level generally had an annual salary of about 30 million. The deputy positions were between 10 million and 15 million. Further down, the city departments, bureaus, offices, departments, and staff had a clear salary at each level. 3 years ago, according to the real statistics of Beihai province, an ordinary staff member in Beihai earned 680,000 Zhongzhou dollars a year. 400,000 was the annual salary, and 280,000 was the unit bonus. Mount Dibing paid tens of billions of salary for the administrative system of Beihai every year. This was just a salary, not some investment or starting some project. It was just a simple salary. In the completely unbelievable and even absurd salary, Beihai province was also creating more incredible benefits for Mount Dibing almost crazily. The administrative system of Beihai was the most streamlined in the whole Zhongzhou state. In some cities in Zhongzhou state, there were more than a dozen deputy chiefs at any time. However, the structure of only 5 deputy chiefs in each city of Beihai was unique. Everyone had a clear division of labor and clear responsibilities. Therefore, their organization was the most streamlined, but the most efficient. Sitting in their positions, whether it was a leader or a staff member, everyone was doing their best to be responsible for their own work seriously. They even wanted to broaden their work scope and get the greatest work results. The director of industry spent most of his time doing research. The director of investment promotion took his subordinates and ran around like a group of salesmen all day long. It was an indescribable atmosphere of desperation and seriousness. Fanatical, excited, and happy. Everyone was working hard to do their own things, and wholeheartedly to make everyone in Beihai live a better life. The year-end audit of Beihai was completely in the charge of the core personnel of Mount Dibing. There was no falsehood at all. It was specific to each city and department. If one did a good job, in addition to the annual salary, there would be a considerable part of the absolutely generous bonus. If one did a bad job, the salary would be downgraded. 2 consecutive salary downgrades, and the appointment would be cancelled. Sharp, accurate, and clear. Along with the super high salary, there was cruel and almost brutal punishment in the administration of officials. This was a sharp sword hanging over the heads of everyone in Beihai. If the amount received was more than 100,000 yuan, life imprisonment, no commutation for life. If the amount received was more than 500,000 yuan, the death penalty would be carried out immediately. If the amount received was more than 1 million yuan. All. Home. Death. Punishment. This could definitely be regarded as the most thorough regulation that Beihai had ever implemented. The degree of its implementation was as firm as the wages that Beihai had never been in arrears for hundreds of years. There was no room for maneuver. No matter what the relationship was in Zhongzhou state, no matter whether the recipient's family was in Beihai, Zhongzhou state, Star state, or any corner of the world, as long as the amount received was more than this limit, death was everywhere. When the first heavenly son of Beihai personally made this law on the stage of Formidable Person, he said, "This is the overall situation of Beihai." When the incredibly high salary was compared with the huge and unbearable cost of making mistakes, no matter how greedy a person was, he could completely calm down and feel the shock. In the hundreds of years in Beihai, there were very few recipients. In the hundreds of years, there were less than 20. 20 people, without exception, received more than the limit. Therefore, no one in the 20 families could escape the judgment of the Wang family of Beihai. The huge temptation and absolute pressure had created the current Beihai. There were basically no so-called complaints in all the administrative departments, and all kinds of problems encountered by the people would be solved immediately. Beihai had lost some of the darkness, so the gray living space had also been completely erased. Not to mention society, even the hoodlums in schools could not be seen anymore. Everyone knew that some things had no future. There was no absolute fairness in the world, but Mount Dibing created a Beihai province for everyone. As long as they worked hard, they could certainly change their lives and destinies. Whether it was fair or not, at least it was worth the sincere expectation of every person in Beihai. They lived and worked in peace and contentment, singing and dancing to promote peace and prosperity. They might also encounter competition in the workplace, be surpassed by people who were better than them, encounter all kinds of difficulties, all kinds of problems, and all kinds of things that they could not tell others. They would still stagger or sing all the way in a hurried and busy life. But in this land, there was no procrastination of the administrative department, no hidden daggers in the smiles of gray people, and no unjust treatment of the big fish eating the small shrimps. Even some of the distorted ideas in Zhongzhou state were not many here. People in Beihai always believed in one thing. If your life did not change, it was not the problem of society, but your choice was wrong. How simple was this sentence? But this was Beihai. There was no outside storm, no desperate gray, no special features that could destroy the will. Outside Beihai, there was another world. But in fact, these so-called, no, and even more things, those things from all corners and fields intended to reach deep into Beihai for some purpose, did all of this really not exist? That was impossible. Darkness and gray had always existed, but they could not enter Beihai. All of this turned into overwhelming pressure and fear that seemed to be able to destroy everything. It fell on Mount Dibing and on every patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai for hundreds of years. Generation after generation. They silently carried all of this, the storm, and the stormy waves, and never took a step back. In front of the number 1 building in the courtyard of Beihai provincial government. When Wen Siyuan met Wang Xingxiao, the gorgeous morning sun was rising from the sea level in the east. The warm light penetrated the darkness and pierced the dark clouds in the sky. The light fell from the sky and pierced Wen Siyuan's eyes. In his sight, Wang Xingxiao was walking over step by step. The sword energy was dense, and the space was twisted. The sunlight falling on him seemed to form a halo around him. The sun lit up the sky and fell on the clear lake in the courtyard of the provincial government. The waves were sparkling. Wang Xingxiao seemed to be walking in the light waves of the sky and water. His figure was majestic. Wen Siyuan stood up from the stone table in front of the door. Wang Xingxiao's figure walked into a verdant courtyard. Xingxiao, you're getting more and more stable. Wen Siyuan smiled gently and his voice was gentle and deep. This speaker of Beihai, who had now gained the full support of the Wang family of Beihai and most of the support of the Southeast group, was not tall. He wore glasses and looked elegant. Even if he dressed casually in his own home, he stood there with an indescribable grace, confidence, and gentleness. At first glance, people would have a good impression of him and a sense of trust. Uncle Wen, I'm sorry to disturb you. Wang Xingxiao shook hands with Wen Siyuan and joked. Other people outside make me busy every day. Now you come to my home and make me busy every day. You're not kind. Wen Siyuan chuckled and waved his hand. Let's go inside. Forget it. Let's sit outside. Wang Xingxiao shook his head. He knew Wen Siyuan's habits. This man started in Yuzhou, walked out of the Ministry of Supervision, entered the cabinet, went to Huading, and finally came to Beihai from Wuxia. He served as the deputy speaker of Xingzhou, the mayor, the speaker, and also the deputy speaker of Beihai. From the governor's position to the leader of the Southeast group, he liked to sit outside the yard in the morning. His biological clock was very regular. He usually got up at 5:30 a.m. For 2 hours after getting up, he never dealt with official business. Instead, he sat in the yard in front of the door in a daze, listened to music, and completely let himself go, regardless of the weather. He started eating breakfast at 7:30 a.m., got ready to go to work at 8 o'clock a.m., came back at 6 o'clock p.m., ate, watched the news, and chatted with his family. If there were no accidents, he would go to bed on time at 10 o'clock p.m. The whole of Beihai developed quietly in this routine day after day. It was stable and magnificent. Now Wen Siyuan invited him into the house, which was undoubtedly to accommodate him. Wang Xingxiao casually sat on the cold stone bench in winter, handed Wen Siyuan a cigarette, and said softly, I didn't plan to visit you at this time, but there were a lot of things last night, so I had to disturb your relaxing time. I already know what's going on. Wen Siyuan nodded and looked at Wang Xingxiao with appreciation in his eyes. The second place on the divine list. Not bad. You are still young. In another 10 years, it is hard to say who will be the first. Tianzong was not as good as you when he was young. At that time, Li Guangde showed off his ability, just like Li Tianlan now. He suppressed Tianzong. But what happened later? It was Tianzong who topped the divine list and even entered the heavenly sun realm. The future is so long. Who can say for sure? Wang Xingxiao smiled bitterly. Looking at the rising sun, he laughed at himself and said, the second place on the divine list, can be said to be the real shadow of my father. Without Wang Tianzong's supreme sword energy, Wang Xingxiao now had the strength of the half-step invincible realm, and there was still a long way to go before he reached the invincible realm. The second place on the divine list? He couldn't even get to the bottom of the divine list. Still the same sentence. Wen Siyuan's voice was calm. The future is so long. Who can say for sure? Wang Xingxiao nodded and said, this is not the most important thing. I didn't come here to seek comfort because I lost my life in Mount Dibbing. Wen Siyuan's eyes flashed. The new ranking of the divine list had become an established fact and could not be changed. In fact, Beihai had known this result for a long time. The glorious list that shone in the dark world now was signed by Wang Xingxiao, who represented the recognition of the Wang family of Beihai. Wen Siyuan said that he already knew what happened last night. Obviously, although the fact that the new ranking of the divine list could not be changed was shocking, it was not enough for people who knew Wen Siyuan to break his routine. Compared with the dark world that was still sensational, the whole Jianghu state had been completely attracted by the fact that Li Huaqing suddenly came to Emperor Dong's palace. What do you want to do? Wen Siyuan looked at Wang Xingxiao and asked with a chuckle. Before we do anything, we have to know what Li Huaqing means. Wang Xingxiao took a drag on his cigarette and frowned slightly. It should not be difficult to guess what he means. Wen Siyuan shook his head. This was the most sober and calmest time of the day, so what he said seemed to have an unquestionable power. Li Huaqing can't let Li Tianlan leave Jianghu state. He went to Xianyuan city, which is a guarantee. As long as he is still in Emperor Dong's palace, no matter how fierce the fight outside is, Li Tianlan will not really turn against him. It doesn't matter if it is a fight, a tit-for-tat, or even a life-and-death fight. For Li Tianlan, no matter whether he dares to do it or not, it is a fact. Li Huaqing in Emperor Dong's palace is equivalent to putting his life in Li Tianlan's hands. This sense of security will not even let Li Tianlan have the idea of turning against him completely. Now the idea of both sides is very simple. They each have a trump card and there is room for negotiation, but no one is convinced by the other. Li Huaqing wants to control Li Tianlan and let Emperor Dong's palace better serve Jianghu state. Li Tianlan is dissatisfied with Li Huaqing because of the Li family. Li Guangde. This is actually just a cover. Of course, this cover is indispensable. But the core problem is still Li Huaqing and Li Tianlan. They can negotiate, but they don't want to. Both sides are afraid of making a bad start and giving in without a bottom line in the future. So they can only fight. Today I will take you down, next year you will take me down. Fight. When you are tired of fighting, sit down and talk. Anyway, Li Huaqing is in Emperor Dong's palace, so it is very convenient for both sides to communicate. They can talk at any time. If they can't reach an agreement, they can continue to fight. Both sides are now showing off their strength, so that they can put forward better conditions in the final negotiation. Now the whole world knows Li Tianlan's trump card, so it is too easy to guess. Both Emperor Dong's palace and Li Tianlan have the right to negotiate, so his trump card is a life-and-death struggle. Once he leaves Jianghu state, all the people who have offended him in Jianghu state have to be cautious like frightened birds, guarding against his possible assassination and beheading at any time. This is Li Tianlan's personal power. Under the counterattack of Jianghu state, Emperor Dong's palace is destroyed. Apart from other things, the Flourishing Age Fund alone is enough to cause a shock to the global financial order. The financial storm is very likely to evolve into a worldwide financial crisis. Many domestic fields will also be shaken at the same time, causing a huge social impact and immeasurable losses. At that time, if that really happens, the huge impact is estimated to be enough to make any prime minister step down directly. And the destruction of Emperor Dong's palace also means that Jianghu state will lose the elite forces of Emperor Dong's palace, Sai City, half of Mount Shu, and even half of Jade Pool. Dongqing Wudi of the giant group won't let it go. The consequences will be even more unbearable. Li Huaqing, who caused all this, will be the one who caused all this. Li Huaqing, who caused all this, even the entire academics, can't bear the consequences. Li Tianlan has now grown to the extent that he is able to drag Jianghu state into trouble. If not, why does Li Huaqing have to be so careful? But if he wants to do this, the price is not what Li Tianlan can bear. When all this happens, Emperor Dong's palace must have been destroyed. The whole Jianghu state regards him as a mortal enemy. So what if Li Tianlan is invincible in the world? When Jianghu state wants to kill a person with all its strength, even if it is not his opponent, there are still a lot of other ways. In that case, Jianghu state will be very uncomfortable, and so will Li Tianlan. When Siyuan's voice paused, and then he continued, so it is unlikely that Li Tianlan will use this trump card. But anyway, this card is in his hands. Since he appeared in the sight of Jianghu state, the outside world has been comparing you with Li Tianlan and Gu Hanshan. Now Gu Hanshan has long been eliminated, and Jiang Shangyu has joined. Among the three of you, Li Tianlan's talent and strength are beyond doubt, but he is too radical. In terms of strength, you and Jiang Shangyu are not as good as Li Tianlan, but in terms of calmness, Li Tianlan and Jiang Shangyu are not as good as you. In terms of forbearance, you and Li Tianlan are not as good as Jiang Shangyu. If the situation happened to you and Jiang Shangyu today, Jianghu state wouldn't be too worried, because the possibility of you compromising is very high. As for Li Tianlan, of course, it's also possible for him to compromise, but the possibility of him directly falling out with you is also very high if he doesn't compromise. His character makes many people worry and even fear him. If Li Tianlan plays this trump card in extreme anger, I'm not surprised at all. At that time, the new group and the academics will die together, and Jianghu state will be in deep trouble. Wang Xingxiao shrugged. That's why Li Huaqing will rush over. As long as he is there, the possibility of this happening is very low. When Siyuan said faintly, the most important thing is that Li Huaqing definitely has a trump card in his hand, and it is a decisive one. After analyzing the current situation, he thinks that as long as he plays this card at the right time, Li Tianlan will definitely compromise, and there will be no second choice. What will it be? Wang Xingxiao's eyes flickered a little. Countless people were analyzing Li Tianlan's character, but no matter how they analyzed it, one thing was certain. Li Tianlan was completely amenable to coaxing but not coercion. It was difficult for the so-called threats and oppression to make him compromise. Maybe at that time, he would rather die in glory than live in disgrace. He shook his head slightly and said softly, anyway, it is unlikely to be a threat or anything. Then it can only be interests. When Siyuan said lightly, what interests can move Li Tianlan the most thoroughly? Let him compromise quickly and let Li Guangtu go, even if he will become Li Guangtu's opponent, even if it will make the integration of the Li family become far away? How great is such a benefit that Li Huaqing is so sure that Li Tianlan will compromise? Wang Xingxiao was silent. His thoughts were a bit chaotic, but he knew what Wen Siyuan meant. Even though he didn't know what Li Huaqing's trump card was, from these few words, he could understand that this trump card represented unimaginable benefits. It was almost unprecedented, and could even be said to be unprecedented in history. But what could it be? It can't be that Li Huaqing intends to have Qin Weibai kidnapped to threaten Li Tianlan, right? Wang Xingxiao made a joke. When Siyuan was stunned and actually began to think about this possibility. Is Qin Weibai still in Jianghu state? Wang Xingxiao was also stunned and said helplessly, "Uncle Wen, I'm just kidding. How is this possible? Why not?" Wen Siyuan looked at Wang Xingxiao deeply, his eyes flickering. If he does this, he will completely become a sworn enemy of Li Tianlan. Even if Li Tianlan will compromise, will Li Huaqing really dare to let Qin Weibai go back in the situation of a dead end? He can only bite the bullet and control her. What is this? Keep her captive? Let her meet Li Tianlan once a year? Let Li Tianlan become a slave and fighter of Zhongzhou state? Wang Xingxiao's voice was a little cold. Wen Siyuan looked at him quietly. So you think that even so, Li Tianlan will not compromise? If that's the case, then there's no possibility of compromise. Wang Xingxiao's voice suddenly became incomparably calm. In some ways, I am the same as him. Putting myself in his shoes, if Li Huaqing touches Song Ci, I will not compromise. Instead, I will try my best to retaliate at all costs. So if Li Huaqing really does something stupid, then Li Tianlan will definitely go directly to Yuzhou and massacre the academics. What else can Li Huaqing do unless he is crazy and completely disregards Zhongzhou state? Facing the crazy Li Tianlan, will he really dare to kill Qin Weibai? So it can only be interests. Wen Siyuan looked at Wang Xingxiao thoughtfully and nodded. Wang Xingxiao did not speak. He frowned and was preoccupied. The conflict between Li Huaqing and Li Tianlan had attracted the attention of the whole Zhongzhou state. The confrontation began, the chaos was coming, and before the election, the sensitivity of this time could not be overstated. All the major groups, even the local teams that wanted to be promoted to groups, were cautious at this time, but they were also ready to make a move. Every decision-maker's every move at this time would first think about not losing points, and then they would think about fighting for more things. They were extremely cautious. In the hundreds of years of history of Zhongzhou state, the Southeast Group, the Prince Group, the North Group, and the Giant Group had all made mistakes at this point because they were too aggressive. As a result, they couldn't recover for 10 years, 20 years, or even longer. They still existed today. It showed that they barely survived. Similarly, there were also teams that were not inferior to the Southeast Group and the Prince Group. Because of a wrong decision at this time, they were defeated and eventually disappeared from everyone's sight. The most recent example was the North Group. A few decades ago, the scale of the North Group was no less than the current Southeast Group and Prince Group. It had 2 stable director positions and 5 to 7 counselors. In the North City, the Northeast region, and more than half of the Northwest region, it was powerful and influential. However, because of a single mistake in decision-making, the various groups that had been restless seized the opportunity to bite the North Group and tear it apart. During that period, the Prince Group tore a large piece of Northwest territory from the North Group. The Giant Group also directly grew stronger at that time. The academics also appeared for the first time at that time and began to use Liaodong as the foundation. After decades of operation, it developed to the present situation. The Southeast Group also made some mistakes during that period, but in the end, it also tore Longjiang province from the North Group. Correspondingly, the North Group retreated step by step, and in the end, they only managed to defend the North City. Compared to their previous grandeur, the North City's current structure of 1 director and 2 counselors was only slightly stronger than the precarious Special Warfare Group. The election was getting closer and closer. With the conflict between the new group and the academics, there would inevitably be more and more people who could not help but directly enter. Wang Xingxiao also wanted to take action, but he did not dare to act rashly, so he consulted Wen Siyuan. Wen Siyuan was the flag figure that the Southeast Group fully supported after the election. In the next 10 years, the layout of the Southeast Group would be constructed by Wen Siyuan and Yi Dongsheng as the directors, so his opinion was crucial. In fact, after talking with Wen Siyuan, Wang Xingxiao would immediately fly to Yuzhou to meet Yi Dongsheng, Ji Wenzhang, Wan Qinyun, and the counselors of the Southeast Group. He also wanted to bring Wen Siyuan's opinion to them. I think we'd better play it safe. Wen Siyuan hesitated for a long time before he slowly opened his mouth. Wang Xingxiao did not speak. The door of the villa opened, and a gentle young woman in her early 30s came over with 2 cups of tea. She smiled sweetly. Xianxia, you're here. I've prepared breakfast. It's a new invention. Try it later. Wang Xianxia smiled and called Sister Qing, nodded, and said yes. When Qing put the tea in front of the 2 of them, smiled, and turned to leave. She was Wen Siyuan's daughter and was now the deputy director of the finance department of Beihai University. She usually kept a low profile, while her husband was now one of the directors of Xingzhou City and a popular candidate for the mayor of Xingzhou City after the election. He had a good relationship with Wang Xianxia and was destined to be Wang Xianxiao's right-hand man in the future, probably similar to the relationship between Wang Tianzong and Wen Siyuan. Wang Xianxia picked up the teacup and took a sip of the hot tea, feeling a kind of warmth in the cold wind of winter in Beihai. Play it safe, he muttered to himself. Play it safe. Wen Siyuan nodded. Don't act rashly. I personally think that as the conflict between the academics and the new group intensifies, some of Li Huaqing's intentions will gradually be exposed. The current situation is a little dangerous. No one knows what kind of trump card Li Huaqing is hiding. We don't need to worry before we get the clues. Wen Siyuan lifted the lid of the teacup and tapped the rim with the lid. In the clear sound of the collision, he continued to say, of course, playing it safe doesn't mean that we don't move. Soon, there should be a clear signal between the academy and the new group. When everyone's attention is attracted, we should find a suitable opportunity to do something of our own. Wang Xianxiao's pupils suddenly contracted, and light gathered. Wen Siyuan looked into his eyes, moved the corner of his mouth, and said faintly, "What do you think about Wu Yue's problem?" Wang Xianxiao lowered his eyelids and said nothing. Wu Yue. Wang Qinglei. This had already become a problem that the Southeast Group and the Wang family of Beihai had to pay attention to. Wang Qinglei had become more and more active in Jianghu State in the past 2 years. Whether he attended various activities or made discoveries on various occasions, everyone could clearly feel that he had drifted away from the Southeast Group and was heading in the opposite direction. Instead, he was getting closer to the Prince Group. Wang Qinglei was a senior counselor. With his qualifications, if he didn't betray, the Southeast Group was ready to push him and Wen Siyuan to be directors of Jianghu State. 5 years later, Wang Qinglei was also a suitable candidate to compete for the position of president in the eyes of the Southeast Group. Perhaps it was the long-term oppression under the shadow of Wang Tianzong, or he felt that it was unlikely for him to sit in that position in the Southeast Group, or he could no longer control his ambition. In the days when he was fully fledged, his remarks made his position more and more subtle. In the end, when Wang Tianzong completely fell, he betrayed the Wang family of Beihai. What made the Southeast Group more sleepless at night was that Wang Qinglei was now the chairman of Wu Yue. Wang Qinglei was very influential in the Southeast Group, but after all, this was a blatant betrayal. Not everyone agreed with him, and not everyone wanted to change. In this election, it was impossible for the Southeast Group to support Wang Qinglei. On the contrary, the Prince Group, which was getting closer to him, would support Wang Qinglei to become a director. However, this kind of support was also reserved. If Wang Qinglei wanted to go further in the Prince Group, the first thing he had to do was to face the current chairman of the Southwest Group. He and Yi Dongxing could be said to be the strongest opponents in the Southeast Group and the Prince Group, respectively. Tan Zhao, the chairman of the Southwest Group, was no worse than Wang Qinglei in terms of qualifications. Compared with Wang Qinglei, who joined the Prince Group halfway, Tan Zhao's position in the group was obviously more deep-rooted. His existence affected many circles inside the Southwest Group, big and small. If Wang Qinglei wanted to defeat Tan Zhao in the Prince Group and get most of the support of the Prince Group, he had to do something first. Simply put, the Prince Group needed Wang Qinglei's proof of loyalty, or in other words, a sufficient expression. What could Wang Qinglei use as a proof of loyalty? A gift that was big enough to defeat Tan Zhao, Wu Yue. The whole Wu Yue. It could only be Wu Yue. If Wang Qinglei could win Wu Yue for the Prince Group and tear this most developed province in Jianghu State, which was even above Nanyue, from the Southeast Group to the Prince Group, it was indeed enough to persuade most of the forces of the Prince Group to support him to fight for the position of director. Wuxia. A stable position as a member of parliament. A cultivation base for countless outstanding talents. A huge influence in various fields. These were all things that the Prince Group could try its best to fight for. Wang Xingxiao could even be sure that in the following chaotic battle, the strategy of the Prince Group without control was to target the Southeast Group while keeping an eye on the new group. After Wang Qinglei, the most likely person to succeed Wang Qinglei was Yu Chuanguang, the former mayor of Huading and the current governor of Wuxia. He was Wang Xiaoyao's best friend and loyal follower. He was also Wang Qinglei's firmest ally. As long as they pushed away some of the Southeast Group spies in Wuxia and pushed Yu Chuanguang up, the Prince Group would not only get Wuxia, but also win over Wang Xiaoyao, an expert at the peak of the Invincible Realm, and the right to speak in Snow Country. After grasping these, the Prince Group would have more chips to use Snow Country as the foundation to attack everything Li Tianlan had in Reki City. How to deal with Wang Qinglei and Yu Chuanguang. How to deal with Wang Xiaoyao. At present, the entire Southeast Group had no way to deal with them, because they couldn't find their flaws for the time being. If Wuxia fell, in the past 2 decades, the Southeast Group had failed in every election and had never won. On the eve of the election more than 20 years ago, the Southeast Group had undergone great changes inside. The Li family had collapsed, and the entire Southeast Group had also suffered a heavy blow. It could be said that the Wang family of Beihai had scraped the bones to cure the poison. But failure was failure, and loss was loss. More than 10 years ago, Huading had fallen, and the entire Southeast Group had retreated in defeat. It had finally stabilized its position. But guarding Huading, Wuxia, and Beihai, the grand occasion of being the first group in Jianghu state had disappeared. And now, was it going to lose Wuxia again? If so, although the only remaining Beihai was not alone, the influence of the Southeast Group in Jianghu state would undoubtedly further shrink and reduce. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were a little hollow. After a long while, he nodded and whispered, "I know what to do." After a pause, he continued, "It's time to do something. Wuxia, it's time to move." Wen Siyuan nodded and said without batting an eyelid, "That's my opinion." "But Wuxia, where are you going to start?" "Eastern Station District." Wang Xingxiao said calmly, "Brother Jiang has rested for more than 2 years, and now he is on the divine list. Without Wang Qinglei and second uncle's gossip, it's time to let him out." Di Jiang. Wen Siyuan's eyes lit up slightly, and he smiled. "This is a good entry point." Wang Xingxiao also smiled. He turned his eyes to the setting sun and looked into the distance. The slight fog in winter in Beihai gradually dissipated in the sun. And in this morning, the loud sound from Yuzhou, Liaodong, and Huading had torn the mist of Beihai in an extremely abrupt situation and radiated to Wang Xingxiao and Wen Siyuan. Their phones rang almost at the same time. The storm that shook the entire Jianghu state turned into thunder that tore the sky. Lightning flashed and thunder roared, and the storm raged. Liaodong. Tan Xiaotian, the secretary of Wang Wei, the leader of the 3rd Supervisory Group, who had gone to Jianghu, was suspected of serious violations of records and was under the control of the Liaodong Ministry of Supervision. The Ministry of Police, Ministry of Publicity, Ministry of Personnel, and other departments began to take action at the same time. In the morning, as many as 20 people had been involved in Tan Xiaotian's incident, and more people were involved. Wang Wei, the leader of the 3rd Supervisory Group, who had arrived in Jianghu, locked himself in the hotel room all morning and did not go out. The storm in Liaodong was fierce, rolling up the snow in the northeast. In the raging wind and snow, everyone seemed to be able to see Bai Qingqian's calm but ubiquitous sharpness in the calm eye of the storm. At the same time, in Yuzhou, headed by the Ministry of Sleep and the Financial Administration Bureau of Jianghu State, more than 5 departments launched investigations into a series of issues such as Yuzhou Brilliant Real Estate, Dongwu Science and Technology, and Pre-Qin International Group's sneaky sleeping, disrupting the order of the persimmon market, commercial fraud, piracy, and infringement. Huading. The headquarters of the Flourishing Age Fund was also subject to a joint raid by various departments. There was no process, no brewing, and no wind. The sky was bright, and the sun was rising. The fiercest conflict between the new group and the academy almost reached its climax in an instant. The battlefield continued to spread. Sabers and swords flashed. Flowers bloomed everywhere, and everyone was overwhelmed. Wang Xingxiao held the phone and listened to Xian Ming, the head of intelligence in Beihai, constantly talking about the latest news. He was in a daze. Obviously, even he did not really react for a while. He had thought that there would be a clear signal, and there would be a gradual escalation of the situation and process. Everything was gone. While they were still discussing and watching cautiously, the two sides had already reached the point where they were fighting with their lives on the line. In this case, what should Jianghu State do? What should the Southeast Group do? Wen Siyuan was silent for a long time. He suppressed the waves in his heart and whispered, "It's time to take action. Tell Sister Qing for me that I'll come to taste her new craft next time." Wang Xingxiao stood up. "I'll leave for Yuzhou right away. Uncle Wen, I'll take your opinion to them." Wen Siyuan nodded. Wang Xingxiao shook hands with Wen Siyuan tightly and turned to leave. Wen Siyuan stood where he was, watching his back getting farther and farther away. Zhongzhou State was stormy. The patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, who set off from Beihai, was full of sunshine at this time. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.